Nancy Pelosi and House Democrats continue to push a radical agenda that will dramatically damage election accuracy and integrity in America. Their latest attempt is a vote today on what we're calling the election takeover bill, House Resolution 4. House Resolution 4 is an unconstitutional power grab and furthers Democratic attempts to politicize our voting rights. Joining me today is Congressman Mike Johnson, representing Louisiana's 4th District. Congressman Johnson is the ranking member from the House Judiciary Subcommittee on the Constitution, Civil Rights, and Civil Liberties, where H.R. 4 was heard just recently. He also serves as the vice chairman of the House Republican Conference, is a leader on the Armed Services Committees, and serves as an assistant whip for the House Republicans. Last Congress, he served as chairman of the Republican Study Committee, known as the Intellectual Arsenal, in the largest caucus of conservatives in Congress. Congressman Johnson, it's great to have you on the show today.
Hey, thanks so much. I'm really a big fan of the Family Policy Alliance and all that you all do. And as I say every time I speak to a subgroup that you gather together, I don't come to you, I come from you, because literally grew up in Louisiana under the tutelage of Tony Perkins, who now runs Family Research Council, and Gene Mills at the Louisiana Family Forum. I used to be I was their bag carrier. So I have great affection for all the work that you all do. And I'm really grateful to God that you're still in the fight.
Well, thank you. God bless you, Congressman. We'll pass on the word. They might be watching right now.
I hope so.
Well, we've seen this year where the Democrats have continuously pushed election overhaul bills. They got different ones, H.R. 1 and Senate 1, Senate 293, and now H.R. 4. Tell us about what's the Democrats' overall goal in this election overhaul agenda? They seem very committed to it.
Oh, they're very committed. You got that right. H.R. 4, it's the number 4 priority. Really, it's the number 1 priority, because sort of the companion to this is H.R. 1, which is all about, as you said at the outset here, the federal takeover of our election system. That is what's at stake, and there's no way to cover that up. You mentioned I'm the ranking Republican on the Constitution Subcommittee in the House. We've had no less than 6 hearings on voter suppression in the U.S. just since January. They're wasting all of our committee time rehashing over and over the same messaging points. And what's at stake is they recognize that the policies that they advance, that the modern, today's Democrat Party is not the Democrat Party of your father or grandfather. It is a radically different platform and worldview that they're advancing. And they realize, as we're seeing right now play out live before our eyes, even today, that the policies that they advance are not popular with the American people. They see what it leads to. And so they recognize that they're not going to win at the ballot box. They're not going to win in public opinion in the coming years. They have to literally take control of the election system so that they can somehow manipulate those elections to ensure that they stay in power. The American people are not going to have any of it. The Republicans in Congress are not having any of it. And we're trying to do the best we can to really put the message out to say what's really at stake here and why all this is happening. And I appreciate the attention that y'all are putting on it.
Well, we're happy to do it because this is a big deal. There's a lot of people that will say what is a big deal or what's not a big deal, what's newsworthy and what isn't anymore in this 24-hour news cycle. But this is actually, to me, as the CEO of the Family Policy Alliance, a former Speaker of the House in Michigan myself, this is our federal government basically saying we run the states, not the states created us. And is it fair for me to say that the even the posture of this bill, Congressman, is getting the American experiment and our Constitution kind of backwards?
Oh, absolutely. And it's an unprecedented federal power grab. That's what I've been saying in all these hearings, and all of us are saying even today on the House floor, to draw attention to that. You and I are both former state legislators. See, it's the Constitution, Article 1, Section 4, that gives the responsibility of setting the time, place, and manner of elections to the state legislatures. And there's a reason for that. The founders, in their infinite wisdom that they had, they wanted to give that authority only to the full body of duly elected representatives of the people, closest to the people, so that there would be accountability for all that. And that system has served us very, very well. Now, there have been periods in our history where there were things that happened that were untoward. In the 60s, during the Civil Rights era, there were some states, some in the Deep South where I'm from, that were resistant to removing their racially discriminatory laws from the books. By the way, those were all pushed by Democrats back in the day, but I digress. But the states were reluctant and resistant to removing those barriers so that minorities could vote. And so the Voting Rights Act was created in the mid-60s to address that issue. What's happening right now, and everybody needs to understand that, is that you'll hear Democrats message how they need to address voter suppression in the states currently, and they need to update the Voting Rights Act, the VRA of the 60s. The problem is the VRA does not need to be renewed. It's current law. It's still in the books, and it's served us very well. The VRA did its job. It served its purpose, and we're all grateful for that. But the fact of the matter is today, we don't need drastic measures, and we don't need a federal takeover of our election system. It is easier, by God's grace, thankfully, it's easier to vote in America today than it has ever been. And indeed, minority populations are more involved in the election process than they've ever been. Voting rates are high. There's nothing to fix here. They're using this as a guise to take over the state's authority and remove it to the federal level. And that is something we have to resist.
And Congressman, that is it's a recipe for disaster because what we're doing is, and you and I are both Christians, and we read about perverse incentives and things like that are talked about in the Bible and in our lives, and you're actually telling the people that are in power. And I'm going to ask you a question here about the Department of Justice. Mm-hmm. With that massive conflict of interest, that they're supposed to call balls and strikes on things from Washington, D.C. that they know nothing of, the conditions on the ground, the weather, the access, the chosen methods of that local government, and all the rest of the stuff. And literally control who gets to vote and who doesn't get to vote, who gets to get counted. This is about disenfranchising people. I think they're trying to say people are disenfranchised. You're properly pointing out that the franchise has never been stronger in America. People have access in a number of, in a variety of methods, ways that they didn't think were possible 20 years ago to vote. And after the Florida election debacle in 2000, the safety and security is on a better trajectory. It needs improvement for sure, the safety and security, and we need to look into what occurs at these elections. But the Department of Justice is coming forward in House Resolution 4 in saying they want to be the umpire without anybody else over or above or around them, super constitutional authority to call the balls and strikes based on what they think is right and wrong, without defining what those things are, and leaving that open to interpretation for future administrations. Am I getting this right, Congress? Is there any reason why we should be concerned about that?
Yeah, absolutely. You should be concerned, because we mentioned a moment ago that the founders, in their wisdom, they gave this heavy responsibility of ensuring free and fair elections to the full body of duly elected representatives in the state legislatures. What the Democrats on Capitol Hill are trying to do right now is wrest that authority away from the state legislatures, the people closest, the representatives closest to the people they represent, and to give that power to unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats in Washington at the Department of Justice. So what ultimately what this would mean is, if this were to become law, and the Democrats are fighting tooth and nail to make sure it does, is that before any state can, for example, move a boundary, we're in a redistricting year. Every 10 years, the states have to reapportion their congressional districts. If a state submits new boundary lines for a congressional district, which they're required to do, or they have a law in the books that says we'll have voter ID before someone can cast a ballot in our state, or we need to update the voter rolls and remove people who are deceased, et cetera. Any change in the law is presumed to need federal oversight, whether there's any kind of intentional effort, discrimination or otherwise at all. Automatically, bureaucrats in some office in the Department of Justice in Washington have to bless that those states would do. I mean, it's just a direct violation of our history and tradition and the Constitution itself. But that doesn't bother the Democrats now. They are so concerned. They want to make sure that the power is tightly held and concentrated here in Washington instead of with the people. And this is a great concern to all of us. And again, it's totally unnecessary. When the Voting Rights Act was challenged, most recently in 2013, the U.S. Supreme Court, is they looked at the Shelby County case, Shelby County v. Holder. They acknowledged the use of the Voting Rights Act. They heralded it, as we all do. It did its job, but they took out one provision, and that's what's called preclearance. And people will hear that phrase a lot. Preclearance was an extreme measure that was put into law in the 60s to make sure that states, mine being one of them, Louisiana, to make sure that there was federal oversight, to make sure the resistant Democrats in Louisiana would back off of the racially discriminatory measures they had and ensure that everybody got to vote and have access to the ballot. It worked. But the Supreme Court, when they looked at this in 2013, said, 2013, they said, we don't need to do that anymore. Obviously, things have dramatically changed since the 1960s. And in fact, here's a really important point. In Louisiana, Texas, Mississippi, for example, right now, the disparity in voter registration between minorities and majority populations is below the national average. And in fact, it is less than the states of California, New York, and the president's home state of Delaware. So Louisiana's doing it better than the president's own home state, and yet the Democrats still want to remove the control to Washington. It's unfathomable.
And that's what frustrates a lot of us congressmen sitting at home is we know that things have gotten better. There's always been fraud in every American election. I would presume in every election in the world. Once you get past a couple hundred people, there's going to be some level. It seldom, if ever, has affected an election outcome in America. It's usually numerically of an insignificant value. And people are striving. We have a lot of concerns as Americans about this last election and the improvements that the states are making. But again, leaving it with the states, the Supreme Court declaring, as you pointed out, on the unconstitutionality of something and it's not being needed. What else has the Supreme Court told us? Is there other reasons for us to hope that if they do pass this bill, the Supreme Court is going to go back to other precedents and say this is not the proper role of the federal government? This is for the states. Is there anything else out there like that?
Well, we would certainly hope so. There are a number of legal challenges that are still lingering out there with the very unprecedented, unusual election cycle that we had in 2020. And as I explain in town halls all the time, people want to know, why was 2020 so different than previous elections? And of course, the answer is because of the pandemic. It was an unprecedented situation where we were in the middle of the COVID-19 crisis during a pivotal presidential election year. And so what happened was you had a knee-jerk reaction on the part of many state officials, local secretaries of state or elections commissioners or governors, what have you. And they jumped into action in the spring and early summer of last year, 2020, because we were in the middle of a pandemic and they knew that the fall election was coming, and many were concerned that everybody would not be able to get out of their house and vote. Now, some people in good faith tried to start changing their state laws. Some, frankly, used it to exploit an opportunity and manipulate elections. But all of this happened right before our eyes, and we were watching it take place. So here's the key thing. All of the changes that were made at those state and local levels in 2020 were done in an extra constitutional manner. In other words, they violated the plain language of the Constitution, because it is Article 2 of the Constitution that says presidential electors, for example, must be chosen in accordance with rules that are made only by the state legislatures. And so what that means basically on the plain language, the base of the Constitution is, if anyone other than the full duly elected body of state legislators makes an election change, a change in the law, a change in the rules leading up to an election, then on its face it's unconstitutional. And that was the problem in 2020. And that's why it led to all sorts of chaos and hijinks and everything that we all know that's infamous now. That's also why people are doubting the veracity and the integrity of our election system itself. And it is what has precipitated all of the states doing what is their duty, their constitutional responsibility, to shore up the mess that happened in 2020 and ensure that it never happens again, so that people don't lose sight or lose faith in our institution and the sacred nature of the vote. And so Georgia and Texas and many other states have leapt into action. Over 400 pieces of legislation are either passed or pending around the country at the state legislatures to ensure the integrity of our system. But the Democrats in Washington see that. they're deeply concerned about it, and they call it voter suppression efforts. It's exactly the opposite of the truth.
And just to revisit that for people, we have some people joining us, and we have a question from the audience too that I'm going to relay to you. But the congressman is on. We're talking about House Resolution 4. We're going to send a link to our Action Center where you can come in. You can call the congressman's colleagues. He's obviously leading the way, and he has on a number of issues for the pro-family movement in America. Tremendous leader in Congress. We're with Congressman Mike Johnson from Louisiana's 4th District. And the congressman is telling us that we need to vote. We need to fight for this vote in Congress, but he also is a lawyer, trained lawyer, and is litigated in constitutional issues. And he's saying that there is some hope for us that these things will be treated as unconstitutional. And for the viewers here, before I get to, I'll tell you the question first, so I don't have to come back on. I'm a recovering politician too, and you can answer both. But the viewer wants to know, can state officials, like if I'm a Secretary of State and I raise my hand, put my hand on the Bible, and I say I'm going to uphold my oath, is this something that is going to get into a situation where states and their attorneys general and others should be seeking nullification of the federal law? Is that your opinion? And second, this is about our franchise, all of ours as voters, everybody. I think every Christian conservative I know wants everybody that is eligible to be allowed to vote without encumbrance. It doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or Republican. That's what makes America great. So what are secretaries of state supposed to do? And is this truly, in the manner of how they're fighting this in the states, making people aware that it is their voice, it is their franchise, not being added to here, but subtracted from? Because you can call your local clerk now. You're not going to get that privilege. You're going to have to call whoever answers the phone at the Department of Justice in the future to make sure your vote counts. So I know there's two different things, but if you could comment on the local officials, both from what they should be doing and also that level of service they provide to making sure our votes count going away.
Yeah, great questions. Let's take the first thing first. And first of all, it's not inevitable that this is actually going to become law. Now, I do think that they have, every Democrat in the House will vote for this. They have only a 3-vote margin now. It's the smallest majority in the modern era. The Republicans did really well. We had a great election cycle in 2020 in spite of what happened with the presidential election. And so we're going to use every tool and leverage we have here in the House. But even if they're able to overcome us by 2 or 3 votes and pass this in the House, there is still a very good chance that this massive, unprecedented federal power grab will not pass through the Senate. And so the first thing to do, I would say the first priority is to pray for first and lean on the members of the U.S. Senate to do the right thing. And in particular, Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema and 2 or 3 others, Hickenlooper, there may be 1 or 2 others who I don't think will give in. And in other words, I think they will hold the line to make sure that the filibuster holds to prevent this from going by just a 50 vote, 50 Democrat passage, Kamala Harris breaking the tie with 51 votes. Because the Senate is split evenly. So it is not inevitable that this becomes law. We're at DEFCON 1 in the concern level, but I think we still could stop it. Now, let's say it does pass the Senate and the filibuster is taken down. They pass it with just 50 votes and Kamala Harris breaking the tie, and it goes to President Biden. He clearly will sign it into law. What happens then? I do think there would be a legal challenge immediately to enjoin the application of this new massive power grab, because they think we have very credible arguments, as I said, that it's unconstitutional. And so we would have, I think, a number of state attorneys general who would step in to do battle. You would have some, of course, secretaries of state who would join in as well. And I think that we would have a good shot at that. Remember, one of the greatest, maybe the longest lasting legacy of President Trump's administration is he got so many originalist conservative federal judges appointed to the benches and of course 3 justices on the U.S. Supreme Court. So I think ultimately we would have a majority there to uphold it. Let's pray that it doesn't come to all that and we can stop this thing in its tracks.
So that leaves us to today. And a lot of people watching this video live now. They're going to be watching it on the loop in the days to come. They want to know, Congressman, this has been a difficult year. I mean, for the truth. Let's start there. Difficult year for the truth, for America's finances, for America's military, for America's families. All seem that we're under siege right now from this Biden administration. And the grassroots that are watching, they want to know what can they be doing? Does their voice still matter? Or has Congress moved on, from listening to the constituents? We have hundreds of thousands of people. The Family Policy Alliance, we reach nearly 1 million more when we add in the 40 state organizations, as you did, like the Louisiana Family Forum. What should we be doing to help you all fight for those rights that were gained, literally, when you're talking about voting rights, gained through the blood and lives of American soldiers for more than 250 years?
Such a great question. My wife Kelly and I go around to different churches in our area in North Louisiana, Sunday nights and Wednesday nights, and we do a little presentation we call Answers for Our Times, and we address these foundational issues to the church. Psalm 11:3 says, if the foundations be destroyed, what will the righteous do? It's not a rhetorical question for us right now. We acutely feel that the foundations of our country are being dismantled. There's an attempt to do that right now. And so we have an affirmative calling, a burden, not only to be salt and light in our communities, but to defend the truth, to contend for the faith, it says in Jude 3, and to stand for the truth. We're also supposed to demolish false arguments, remembering that our battle is not against flesh and blood, but against principalities. And what we're fighting for here is the greatest experiment in self-governance, the greatest nation, we believe, in the history of the world, because God has allowed it and blessed it. We have been one nation under him. All of that is imperiled right now. The right to individual freedom and limited government and the rule of law and peace through strength and fiscal responsibility, free markets, human dignity, the sanctity of every human life. Everything that we believe in that's grounded in Scripture and is timeless truth is under assault. And so what does the church do? What does the Family Policy Alliance do? What do concerned believers do all over the country? We step up and we defend truth. We do it in love, but we stand for truth without apology. We need consistency, clarity, and consistency, and we need activism at the state and local level. It means rolling your sleeves up and getting involved and going to school board meetings like we're seeing now, people rising up and making sure they know what's in the local curriculum and that people at that local level are held accountable. They're going to the state legislatures. They're making sure that those who are elected to go and serve and vote on behalf of us are accountable, that they're doing the right thing, that they're advancing the right philosophy, that they too are being held to account so that they'll defend these foundational truths. If we don't do that at every level, there's no hope in Washington. We always say politics is downstream from culture, and the culture is what we're fighting for. The truth, the foundations of America, they're imperiled. But I'm telling you, I'm bullish on America. I believe God's not yet done with us. I think we are, as Ronald Reagan said, the last best hope of man on the earth. We are the torch of freedom. We are the defenders of liberty. And I believe that our best days are ahead of us. It took a Carter to get a Reagan, okay? And as dark as it seems right now, I think that people are waking up. The polling is coming back in our direction. I think we're going to have a massive red wave in 2022 and the midterm election. And I think we can begin to turn this around.
Well, you've really lifted my spirits, Congressman. I'll tell you that, just with your answer to the last question I had, and with your hope for America. I will join you in your enthusiasm that sometimes it takes pain to have a willingness to change and to return to the values that have made America great. And let's pray that this pain that we're enduring right now gets us there. I heard an enthusiastic endorsement for you out to our listeners to stay involved, exercise their voice as citizens in America, and that they do make a difference still. And that's what we're going to continue to encourage you to do, our audience, as we support Congressman Johnson as he carries forward the fight there for us in Congress against House Resolution 4 to allow for free and fair elections in our states. We need our states to look after making them free and fair and secure, not our federal government. And we appreciate everything you're doing. We didn't get time, Congressman, to jump into the life issue, where I know that you're a very strong pro-life leader too, but we'll have you back on the show because our audience is going to want to know what's up with that too. Dare we say that we might be in a post-Roe era in the coming years, and what does that look like in Congress? So we'll be following up with you there. But we'll be sending our prayers to you today. For those of you that are watching at home, please visit the Action Center. The Congressman needs your help. We're going to need help in the Senate once they're done with the House action today. And we'll just keep going forward, Congressman. Thanks again for being on the show.
Thank you. And let me say in closing, I've been involved in the Family Policy Alliance and Family Policy Councils for over 25 years. I'm telling you what y'all know, stating the obvious. Your work has never been more important than it is right now. So stay strong. We appreciate you so much. God bless.
God bless. Thank you.